Good morning, friends. Most of you know us, but perhaps there are a few that don't. I'm Nayaswami Jyotish, and this is Nayaswami Devi. And we live mainly at the village, but all over the world now. We travel to all of the Ananda centers and try to help guide the work. This morning's topic is really a fascinating one, very, very instructive. This passage from the Gita, I'll start with that and then come back to the story of Judas, because the passage from the Gita is extremely instructive because it shows how we get ourselves in trouble in the first place. Pondering on sense objects, sometimes it's translated as gazing at sense objects, then leads to desire, and desire, if frustrated, leads to anger, and anger leads to infatuation, meaning that you get focused on just that one thing and you have to have it. And then you begin to lose discrimination and eventually you lose all sense of purpose. We saw a beautiful example of this. I can't call it beautiful, a very graphic example of this. A few years ago, we were driving down from Ananda to Palo Alto here. And I'm not sure whether it was a Saturday afternoon, it was probably a Sunday afternoon, because there was some big ball game on. Either the Giants or the 49ers were playing. And so by the time we hit Berkeley coming down, the traffic was jammed, and it was really jammed crossing over the Golden Gate Bridge, or the Bay Bridge. And so long wait to get to the toll booths. And so here we were, everybody was impatient. Everybody had desires. The desire was get through that stupid toll booth and get on to wherever we're trying to get to. Well, someone in a big truck was in a lane, and he spotted an opening in the next lane and decided that he was going to grab that. So gazing, he saw it. Gazing created desire. And so he went for it. Well, the person behind him started honking and banging, and pretty soon anger flared up. The guy who was trying to cut in line jumped out of his truck, big pickup truck, began pounding on the hood of the car behind him. Cars started honking. It was just lovely chaos. Fortunately, it didn't end up in a fight and maiming or death and the loss of life, but it wouldn't be impossible that it could have. But such a graphic example of this flow of energy. So how do we stop it? Because we too are subject to that kind of thing, maybe not leaping out and banging on the hood of a car behind us, but we too get frustrated. We too allow anger to take over, or at least frustration. Well, the first thing, Master talked about it in very, very well chosen passage from Whispers about how to overcome sense desire, that you catch it as soon as possible and you don't feed it. And so gazing at something and then pondering it is what begins that cycle. And so if we catch it very early on in that cycle, we can stop it. But you can't stop what I could call metaphysical desire. That's the way the universe functions. Our cells desire oxygen, our lungs want it, our mind desires stimulation, we want food. Constantly, this world is set up on the basis of desire. So we can't suppress it, but we can channel it. So if we begin to channel that desire, first of all, don't feed it more than you have to. So don't gaze at things. When Sears and Roebuck, as now Sears, started, they were a little company that sold pots and pans and things of that nature, and they sold it to mining communities especially. And they were getting along, but not too well. And so they would print up a catalog, and they would bring it so the salesman could go through the items more quickly. Well, they had the idea, instead of having only one catalog and showing it to a potential buyer at a time, let's distribute catalogs to everyone. And so they distributed catalogs to everybody in the mining community, and pretty soon everybody was gazing. And once that gazing started, desire started, and Sears and Roebuck became the biggest retail company in the country for a period of time. But that gazing starts the process. And so Master says, stop that process. Don't keep feeding wood and little sticks and logs into the fire of desire. Stop it as quickly as you can. The other thing that helps to control it is, don't just let desire bubble and boil. Control it, focus it. If you can't stop it, then at least focus that desire. It's like if you have a big pot on the stove, you can't put your hand over that pot in any place without getting scalded from the steam. If you put a top on that pot and lock it down and don't turn the fire off, it's going to be even worse. So if you try to repress desires by just completely stuffing them, then it's going to be even worse than letting the desires scald you. And so what can you do? Well, the teapot is the answer. You suppress that steam coming everywhere, but you have an outlet for it. And so that little spout on the teapot channels all that steam, and then you can put your hand all over the rest of you just have to avoid that one spot. And if you want to, you can even channel that steam to do useful work. The steam engine was based on that principle. Well, what that is for us as devotees is, if we channel the desires into a spiritual flow, then we can use it for useful work. For us, useful work is moving towards self-realization. And so this beautiful chant that they ended with, Shri Ram, Jai Ram, Jai Jai Ram Om, one of my favorite chants. There was a devotee named Ram Das, servant of Ram, and he was a great saint. His sadhana was chanting that chant, writing it in a little book. And he would travel throughout India. Swami actually met him, and he was a great, great saint. This is not the American Ram Das, Indian Ram Das. And so he would travel. One time he was with a companion, and it was night, and mosquitoes were just all over them. And the man was complaining, and Ram Das said, no, bless the mosquitoes. They're going to help keep us up so we can chant Ram Nam. Chant Ram Nam. So one night he was traveling alone, and it was stormy, and he stopped in a little hut to take shelter. And this madman came in, and his eyes were all ablaze, and he kind of looked at Ram Das, and he said, "Give me that chadar, the little shawl." So Ram Das gave it to him. "Give me that pot that you have." He had a little begging bowl, because that's how he got his food. Ram Das gave it to him. He didn't seem to want the little notebook that was filled with Shri Ram, Jai Jai Ram Om. Took Ram Das's staff, and that was all he had left. He didn't need his loincloth, so the madman then stomped away. In the morning, Ram Das's disciples came, and they heard about this story, and they got really upset and angry. And they were going to go out, and they were going to find this madman, this fellow, and they were going to beat him up, teach him a lesson. Don't treat our guru that way. And Ram Das said, "What kind of madmen are you? Haven't you learned anything that I've been trying to teach you? Here I've devoted my whole life to Ram, and he comes in the middle of the night, and he asks for a shawl and a begging bowl, And you want to go out and find him and beat him up? What kind of mad people are you? So he saw everything. He had channeled everything into the search for God. Well, now we come back to the story of Judas, because Judas was a great saint. You can't be someone who's one of the 12 closest people to an avatar like Christ without having earned that position. In fact, we think of Judas as being, oh my God, he must have been thrown into hell for all eternity for betraying Jesus. Well, in fact, Yogananda knew him in this life. He was a disciple in Ramakrishna's ashram. And he was very quiet and kept to himself. He still had a little attachment to money. And the other disciples would sometimes tease him about that. And Ramakrishna said, don't tease him. He's suffered enough over this. But in this lifetime, in that lifetime, he was freed. So just 2, 3, I don't know how many lifetimes intervened, not that many in 2,000 years. So a couple of ticks of the clock and he was freed. So it wasn't like he was condemned forever, but his great fault was having channeled virtually all of that energy now into finding God and finally achieving the life in which he was there with an avatar, with God in manifested form, and absorbing the vibrations, absorbing the teachings. It wasn't so much that he betrayed Christ for money. It was that he didn't have yet the clarity of karma that allowed him not to argue with his guru. Why are you having this woman rub your feet? Let's take that costly ointment and sell it and give it to the poor, as it says in the Bible. He didn't care about the poor. He was not yet able to align his will completely with the will of Jesus. But he was close to that, or he wouldn't have been in that position. And so we as devotees, our job is to channel the energy, channel the desires that we have that otherwise will take us all around, otherwise create a big pot and scald us. Channel that into devotion, into desire to find God, and then align our will as carefully and as closely as possible to the will of God as expressed through the Guru. And if we do that, then we will achieve the goal that we're all seeking, which is nothing outside of ourselves, only to realize who and what we are at the very highest level.
I'll also share a few words. I always get surprised by how loud this is. Because we don't come often, and it's a nice way to connect with everyone. Master said to some of his disciples once as they were sitting around him, "Some of you will fall, but it needn't be if you stay in tune." And that's a very interesting statement on many levels, and we'll touch on some of the topics briefly. But to stay in tune means to keep in the vibration of the Guru. It's as simple as that. And everything we do, our sadhana, our service, chanting, study, everything, it's devotion. It's to stay in the vibration of the Guru, of your chosen path. And there's a story that happened during Master's lifetime. Swamiji tells it. There was a disciple, direct disciple, and Master told his monks, don't hitchhike. But this man was going somewhere, didn't have a car, this monk, and he said, well, that doesn't apply to me. That's, again, the guru's teachings applies to everyone else, but in this circumstance, it doesn't apply to me. And so he was hitchhiking, and he got picked up by these sort of rough-looking men, and rather than taking him to where he wanted to go, they took him to some abandoned house in the country, and one of them he tried to run away, but one of them was standing guard over him, and several of the men went to this house, were knocking on the door, trying to get inside, but no one opened the door. And so they ran back to the car, threw this young monk out, and just took off. They said, let's get out of here. And this monk made his way back to Mount Washington, and Master said, I told you not to hitchhike. Those men were going to use you as part of a crime, and I had to stop the ears of those men in the house so that the others couldn't get in. Why don't you listen to me? And hopefully the man never hitchhiked again. I never heard the rest of that story. But some of you will fall, but it needn't be if you stay in tune. The Guru's protection is there. And furthermore, the Guru helps us to work out the seeds of karma that we can't seem to get at any other way. Beautiful story from the life of our Guru, Swami Kriyananda. And he had a very high-minded young monk who was with Sri Yukteswar, and his vocation in life was to be a monk. But there was just a little desire for a marriage relationship, just a thread, not enough to pull him off his vocation, but enough to trouble him. And one day Sri Yukteswar said to him, come with me, I have a surprise for you. The young monk didn't know what to think, but he went with Sri Yukteswar, and they went to the train station, boarded a train, and before the train was pulling out of the station, it was still sitting there on the tracks, letting other passengers get on board. And Sri Yukteswar kind of tapped the boy on the shoulder and pointed at a train sitting on the opposite tracks. And there, in the window opposite him, in the other train, was this beautiful young girl. And in that moment, it was like he saw that she was everything that he was yearning for in a perfect life companion. But just in that moment, with the attunement of the Guru, the desire was gone in an instant. It just took that moment in the company of the Guru to transmute that desire, free him of it forever, and he was never troubled by that again. Some of you will fall, but it needn't be if you stay in tune. And so, what does this point, we were looking, some of you are going to be going on the Assisi trip with Shanti. Many years ago, Jyotish and I went to a spot that you'll be going to, a very holy site related to St. Francis of Assisi, where he received the stigmata. And in that place, there is one of the great works of Renaissance art by Della Robbia, the great sculptor. It's called the Annunciation, and it's a bas-relief, just beautifully done. And the first time we visited, which was many, many years ago, there was this old Franciscan monk, and he was showing us around, and he showed us that beautiful piece of art, and he helped us to see it with deeper eyes. And he said, look, the artist captured that moment when the angel is asking Mary, will you take on the karma? Didn't use that word, but essential that concept. Will you take on that karma of being the mother to the Son of God? And we think of these things as, oh yeah, she knew what she was going to say, but the artist captured so sensitively that moment where the angel is looking inquiringly, and Mary hasn't yet decided. And that moment, and that's why this passage from the Gita, how it is so, so important. Because if we catch that moment where we think, the moment of choice, and we know we could go either way, and if with the attunement with the Guru, we know which way to go. But we need to forever be vigilant, ever vigilant, because as it says in that passage, delusion is very, very strong. The pull of delusion away from our higher principles, purposes, is very strong. So what do we feel in those moments? There's so many different things. You can say desire for whatever it is, a new car, you drive along El Camino and there are many incredible looking cars. And just in that moment, but catch it and say, do I really want that? No, Lord, I really don't want that. And so to catch it in the moment and turn it around with dynamic awareness. So you just say, okay, that's beautiful, but I don't need that. So that's one thing, just to turn one way to catch that moment so that you don't fall down that slippery slope that ends in lack of discrimination and lack of clarity of life purpose. So catch it and reverse it and say, don't need to go there. Been there, done that. Another thing is that moment of rebellion, like, I am tired of trying to discipline myself. I'm just going to go in the bar and have a drink. What harm is it going to do? Just that one. And many of you may have friends or personally known people that struggled with substance abuse and have been so helped by the AA program. And it just catch that moment. No, you can't go there, not even for once. Because with that little opening that door to that once, the whole edifice crumbles. So just to that rebellion, when you feel that coming, and it has a particular quality. Do you recognize it in yourself where you just say, I don't want to? I remember once, we have a grown son, but when he was a little boy, some children had teased him and he was crying, and Jyotish was giving him wise counsel that, no matter how other people treat you, you have to be their friend and give them good energy. And our son was about 5 years old, and he looked at him, he goes, Daddy, I don't want to be that kind of person. And that's the whole point. There's those moments where we say, I don't want to be that kind of person. I want to be the other kind of person. But honestly, we don't have that freedom. We can, of course, make that choice, but then where does it end up? It ends up in pain and suffering for us. So not being vigilant in the moment, thinking it, as we said, it doesn't apply to me. I know the Guru's teachings are true, but he doesn't understand this particular circumstance. In this circumstance, hitchhiking is okay. And if the Guru's words are true, they're always true, unconditionally true, without any qualification. And so when we begin looking at those moments and all the mental rationalizations that we justify what we know will bring us suffering. There's one of the great passages in the Bhagavad Gita when the disciple Arjuna asked Krishna, what is it that draws us into action that we know will bring us suffering, even against our will? And Arjuna's answer it is the rajasic force, the rajasic guna. It's that power of activation and involvement with the universe that against our will pulls us outward. But we don't have to get caught if we stay in tune, if we catch the moment, if we trust that the Guru's advice, his teachings always apply. And once you align yourself with that, it honestly becomes easier because you don't have to weigh and figure out every single circumstance. Well, is the Guru's word right here but not there? You think, no, it's always right. Lord, I follow your ways because they're simpler, they're more direct, and they keep me safe from suffering. And that's what it's all about. What does it mean to fall? It means to rebel against our own higher self. In Christianity, the great image of the fall, Satan, who is the highest angel, He rebels against the Lord, and boom, here we are. But that spirit of rebelliousness that we think we justify, and in fact, in the West, honestly, we glorify. You know, you look at movies, I would say 90% of modern heroes are the rebel, the anti-hero. You know, why? Because it's that no one's going to tell me what to do. Well, we can live many, many lifetimes that way. And at the end, what do we have? Just dust in our hands. But we can start saying, I've rebelled enough, Lord. I've stubbed my toe. I've gone in the opposite direction that you showed me. And I've learned something. Not to beat ourselves up about it, but just say, I have learned. I have learned. And now I choose to walk in alignment, to stay in attunement. And if we do, we won't fall, but so much more than that. If we stay in attunement, we will reach the point that all the great masters hold out before us as a shining goal. We realize that we are children of God, that we are one with God, one with His joy, with His love, with His light. And in that freedom of spirit, we find why the great masters come to this world. God bless you.